Well, hello and welcome back to the Religion Hurts podcast. My name is Mike Harrison, and I'm thrilled to have you with me today. I have taken, I don't know if it's been a month or it's been probably closer to 6 weeks. I'll see tonight when I go to upload this video exactly how long it's been, but I've been off for a hot minute. We had a family vacation that came up, and it wasn't originally planned. Like it was planned, but it wasn't planned for a long period of time. We found out my wife's brother and sister were going down to Florida to go visit with. So my wife's got a brother in Jacksonville, Florida, a brother in South Carolina, a brother in Fargo, North Dakota, and a brother in Rolette, North Dakota. And the oldest brother, who's in Rolette and lives on the family farm, was headed down to Orlando to go to Universal Studios, and then Jacksonville to visit the other brother, and then everybody together going up to South Carolina and having a family trip. And we were up in May visiting up in North Dakota, and he asked if we'd have any interest in joining and doing it. It was going to be right around July 4th weekend, and so that kind of came up a little bit last minute for us. And we went home, we talked about it, my wife and I were like, this just sounds like a great time. There's been so much division in her family with some of the stuff we've talked about on this podcast, with her sister and brother-in-law who became a pastor and kind of just caused a lot of damage and hurt. And we just saw what a great opportunity to be with family that doesn't normally get together. And so we jumped at the opportunity, and but it meant some busy weeks for me. At first, I actually wasn't going to go. At first, we had decided this is a great opportunity. You know, Chris, you need to go. My wife's name's Christy, or I call her Chris. Chris, you need to go take the boys. It'll be incredible. And so she was going to go, and Memorial Day weekend came. So we had decided about the week before Memorial Day weekend. I actually bought her ticket and all three of my son's tickets. I'd gotten all that done. We had arranged a bunch of stuff. And then she ended up going back to North Dakota for our niece's graduation on Memorial Day weekend. And I went camping with one of our sons. And I was just sitting there, my son's 14. He had a couple friends come out, and they were out biking and doing stuff. And I'm just sitting by myself, just quietly around the fire and just enjoying the peace and quiet. And I'm just considering everything. And I thought, I had a bit of a conviction. I just had a thought like, Mike, you always say, when the winter comes and life is a little bit slower, because, I work construction, so the summer is definitely a little busier than the winter, more because we have more daylight and stuff in the part of the world where we live in Minnesota, and so you end up working a few more hours, and there's always a lot of projects to do. And I always say, the winter would be better to go on a vacation because I'll have more time. But the reality is, I never have any time. God's always blessed me with plenty to do, and probably a combination between God blessing me and me not being able to sit still in all reality. And so I was just thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? Why would I miss this opportunity to be with family? And more importantly, why would I miss this opportunity to be with my sons? They're getting to ages 12, 14, and 18, where how many more trips is the 18-year-old going to go with us on that's, a family oriented, where he's one of the kids' trips and not another adult kind of joining us, right? It's kind of getting close to that point. And so I felt convicted. So my wife got back and said, I got to go with you guys. So went and bought another plane ticket, was able to get on the same flight and everything. And we took 9 days total and went to Florida. We went to Cocoa Beach. We went to Universal Studios. I walked a total of 12 miles at Universal Studios in one day. That was kind of incredible. 30,000 steps or some crazy number like that. And, I'll just say this briefly. I don't do rides real well. I get car sick or motion sick really easy. And so we got there right away in the morning at 9 in the morning, and we went on this ride, Haggart's something or other, and it's kind of like a motorcycle. And I'm like, I ride motorcycle, in real life, I'll be fine on this ride. So I get on this ride, and we start going, around corners, and everything's going crazy. And all of a sudden the ride goes backwards. Then it drops through a hole. Then you're sitting in some dark cave that's incredibly hot, And no lie, I was doing everything I could to not puke my guts out at that point. I somehow made it off the ride and went, done. No more rides for me today. That's my ride. I ended up going on a water ride later, which is a straight drop, and I could do that. But that was it. I was done with rides. So essentially, we'd walk, from there, we go to the next ride. They'd have about an hour wait per ride, give or take, right? So we'll go and do that. And we just, while they were sitting in there and they're taking their time going on the ride, I would just go and go for a walk, just go see what there was to see. And had a great time doing that, just getting to see everything that was out there. I'm that way anyway. I'm an explorer. I love to see what there is. And so, but while they were waiting in line, I was walking. And so I put a lot of miles on that day. But what an incredible time. Then we spent a day at a pool with everybody. Then we drove with everybody up to South Carolina together, spent 3 days up in South Carolina with all the brothers and everybody. What a great time. Absolutely loved it. Thoroughly enjoyed the time up there. And then got to go down to Florida, see my sister and my niece, which was awesome. Super proud of where my sister's at and just what they're doing in their life there. It's really cool. They had just left the same church that my brother-in-law, my wife's sister's brother, so John was the pastor, and his wife Mary. So John and Mary, their church that had created all this drama and everything, my sister and her husband was originally from North Dakota. They were going to this church. They had moved back from Florida to North Dakota for a couple of years. His mom had passed away, and he came and moved up and stayed with his dad and helped him and stuff. They were going to this church, and they just got chewed up and spit out horribly. They'd also been in that same, I've talked a lot about this cult and this group that I was a part of. They were also part of that group. They get out, they're out for like a year, then they end up at this church. John and Mary were in that group with us as well, and unfortunately, where we've tried to get away from everything that was crap about that group, and it wasn't much good. John's just seemed to take it and be like, well, it was only bad because of who's leading it, but everything they taught was somehow good, and I can do it better, and it's just been a disaster. Thankfully, he's resigned from that pastoring position. I mean, he left a ton of damage in his wake, unfortunately, and but at least that's done, and he's off, framing houses and stuff now, and they've actually moved out of North Dakota as well, went out west. They don't talk to the rest of the family, unfortunately. Just completely devastated everything. Just came in, worked for 2 years, and blew everything up. Little side note: if your pastor comes in and destroys everything, they're not a pastor. They're just a destroyer. That's insanity. Pastors should be bringing peace and stability and connection and growth, not blowing stuff up. If they're blowing stuff up, just other way, go. Sorry, I'm being really emphatic with my hands about that. So, but yeah, get out of there. And if you don't feel supported and encouraged and uplifted, get out. Don't be part of something like that. Now, I'm not necessarily a big fan of, if your church isn't perfect, get out. I'm not a big fan of that kind of phraseology. I think there's no perfect church, and there'll always be something with your church that isn't quite right. Kind of like there's no perfect marriage. And if your wife's not perfect, leave her. Like, I don't believe in that. I mean, you got to work through it the best you can. But if your wife's abusive or your husband's abusive, that's an entirely different situation, right? So if your pastor's abusing people, don't be part of it. Just get out. And anyway, so now they're gone. And my sister Jewel and her husband Josh, they moved back from North Dakota back to Florida. They had lived in Florida for, I want to say 6 years, maybe a little longer. And so they moved back down to Florida after all this. And my sister and I have been talking pretty steady for about 6 months, but we hadn't seen each other in quite some time. And we're curious how it would go. Got to go spend an evening with her and Josh and their daughter. Oh my word, what an incredible time. Was so encouraged, so thankful to get to spend that time with them. And then I've talked about it on here before. My best friend Nate got killed in a car accident, I think roughly 3 years ago now. And his wife has gotten remarried and then divorced, and now she's about to get remarried again. But one of her sons was 18 or pretty dang close when this happened. So he's stayed in North Dakota, is still there. She moved to Iowa to get married, but she left one of her sons who didn't want to leave when she went to Iowa, and he was 14 or 15. She just left him in North Dakota, and now he was living there with his older brother, and quite the mess. Just a lot of turmoil and heartache there. And Josh and Joel. So it's Nate. I know I'm throwing so many names out and so much things. So Nate, who is my best friend, his younger brother is actually my brother-in-law, Josh. I mean, Nate and I are friends since we're 14, and Josh was just a little kid at that time, so there wasn't a connection. But my sister obviously got to know Josh through our friendship, and eventually they got married. And so Nate's younger brother, Josh, and my sister are married. And so, Nate's son, Z, now is living with Josh and Joel, went down with them down to Florida. And 17, he's a few months away from being 18, just doing incredible. And it was so uplifting and encouraging for me to see Nate's son thriving and doing well and having a role model in his life like Josh. Nate was an incredible man, my best friend, and was like an anchor in my life a lot of times. And Josh is same, different person, same cloth, and just good people. And so getting to see Z be with him there and have him as an influence in his life, man, just super encouraging to me. So that was a great experience. And then CFAN, who I go to Africa with, the organization I go to Africa with, Daniel Kalenda, who's the CEO of CFAN, he's also the pastor of Nations Church in Orlando. And so we got to go on the last Sunday we were there and go to Nations Church and see Daniel and a bunch of the people that I've gone to Africa with that go to church there. So that was an incredible experience, a lot of fun to do. Got to go for dinner with some dear friends from there. So yeah, just an amazing trip, worth it. But the lead up to that trip made my schedule super tight, and I just felt like I kept saying, "Oh, tomorrow I'll find enough time to record the podcast. Tomorrow I'll find enough time," and I just was not finding it. Then we got back, and it's been kind of the chasing my tail, kind of getting re-caught up since. So I guess I took a summer break from the podcast. You can call this season 2 if you want. You can call this the whatever you want to call it. But I'm back. Should be putting videos out every week again. Super thankful if you're rejoining and getting back as part of this. Man, I just love doing this stuff. But it was a good experience to, but I also have to give a bit of a shout out. So I've got 2 aunts that are sitting there right now as I'm doing this podcast, sitting on a deck drinking something, probably some iced tea, would be my guess, iced tea. Yeah, it's too early in the day for anything else. So they're sitting there drinking some iced tea out on their deck in Ontario. This is both my mom's sisters, and they're harassing me because I haven't put a podcast out in a while. So, and Trix and Manny, here you go. I'm back to doing podcasts. So thank you for the push. Thank you for the harassment. I love you both. I appreciate you so much. And so, yeah, so now here we are doing this again. But what I was going to say is one of the cool things about having this bit of a break is I've put a lot of thought into future and just different things that have been kind of interesting to consider. Kind of, I think I told everybody not too long ago, as far as recent podcasts, I don't know if it was the last one I did or the one before that I started going back to school to become a pastor. And I have the summer off, July and August, and I go back September 20th is my next class. And I've been considering a lot, why am I doing this? Why did I feel this impression, this, what, if you want to call it the leading of the Holy Spirit, whatever, however you want to interpret it, why I've been feeling this sense like I need to do this. And it's just something I've just been praying a lot about, future, praying a lot about just different things. And what's been interesting through it is praying about Africa, actually praying a little bit about some of my jobs, how I want to keep doing construction and different things. And it's been really interesting. He's kind of taking me through a bit of a walk. I'm going to get into part of this in my testimony in later episodes, talking about some addiction and things of that nature. Specifically some sex addiction and pornography and some of that stuff. But I was listening recently while I was working. I listened to a lot of different podcasts and things while I work. And I was recently listening to Lecrae's podcast. And Lecrae is a Christian rapper, but he has this podcast that's kind of fascinating. He gets into some really deep subjects with guests. And he had a woman on there that she worked for an agency that recruited women into OnlyFans. Now, if you don't know what OnlyFans is, I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of this, but OnlyFans is essentially a platform where you can become a creator. You can put whatever content you want on there. It's got a paywall, so people will subscribe to your feed, or to however you want to put that, and then they get all your custom videos. Now, what it's become really big for is for women that are doing pornography or that kind of a thing, and they'll post content that they record themselves or have somebody record. I don't really know, but they create their content. Then you pay a subscription fee to OnlyFans, and then you're able to watch the specific content of this creator. But this woman that worked for this ad agency for quite some time, she'd recruit women who were looking, who had either done pornography or were stripping or were just looking to make more money, and she'd help them get into this, and then she'd help them build their brand. And that was what her agency did, is just help them build their OnlyFans brand and make this connection. And she had some fascinating things to say. She said, and I'm going somewhere with this, so just hang on with me for a second. She talked about, she wasn't a Christian through this. And through this all, she got saved. And her testimony was actually really cool, hearing her testimony of how she got saved and how she left that and everything. But she's talked about why OnlyFans. She gave a bunch of statistics that I don't have them written down here. I don't remember. But essentially, since COVID is when OnlyFans started to explode. And if you remember what happened during COVID, lockdown, massive lockdown. And people were just home. They were alone. They were disconnected. People were afraid. You guys remember all these feelings from COVID. And she said one of the biggest things that happened is, or why specifically OnlyFans has gotten so big, is because they have one thing that pretty much all other pornography or things of that nature doesn't have, and that's connection. And what I mean by connection is, from what I understand, the way she described it is, you can have you subscribe to this, but as part of the subscription, what they would really encourage is that these stars, these women that were, or content creators, if you want to call them that, they, somebody subscribes, and then you can interact. You can have messages back and forth. And she said what it's essentially doing is creating a form of intimacy between the content creators and the person who's paying. And that's one thing that's being done differently than what any other platform has been doing. Now, I've been out of the game of looking at this stuff for quite a long time, so I don't really know too much. I haven't experienced it, but I can understand what she's saying. And she said, if you can take a look in this world right now and see how under attack men are, and women as well, but for right now I'm talking about men, and as a man I'm talking about it, but how under attack men are. They're getting, men are getting feminized. They're being made to not be men. They're being made to, toxic masculinity is under attack, which isn't necessarily bad, but I think with it, masculinity is getting lost as to what that actually means. I really believe there's a way to be a man that's strong, stable, steady, protector, provider, but also isn't toxic and over masculine. But masculinity is taking a hit. Everywhere we turn, masculinity is getting destroyed. And then these men are getting targeted because they're losing connection. They're losing family. They're losing these things. If you go and you read since COVID, and maybe the next podcast I'll try to have some statistics here so I can talk about it a little bit better. The rate of depression in men, how much it's growing, and how much suicide in men has grown significantly, and just the way men are being bombarded by things, it's an incredible thing. And I've begun to realize, so I have a really good friend, I've talked about him before on here, Derek, is a worship pastor at the church where I go. I do sound with him, I play guitar with him. Love him and his wife Ashley. They're just probably two of my most favorite people in this world. And he's always saying to me, Mike, you got a calling to minister to men. You got a calling to be there with men. And I'm always like, oh, okay. Now, I work in construction. I work in a hard industry, a blue-collar industry where we get some pretty interesting and fun men in this industry. And, the felons, the hards, the this, the that. And I also, I'm a biker, and I spend a lot of time around bikers. So a lot of hard men. And you have to learn a certain type of hardness and a certain type of way of being. If I walk onto I've been a job supervisor, I've been a project manager, I've been a foreman, I've led 40, 50 men on jobs before, multiple crews, multiple guys. And you have to be able to walk into that type of man's world, where everything is. And if you don't learn how to carry your own in that, you are going to get chewed up and spit out like that. It's an unforgiving world until you learn how to stand and survive in it. And yet I've been amazed at how many of these men are shattered, broken, destroyed, and desperate for love and kindness. And he's just talked about that a lot, like just been encouraging to me over the last 3 years or so, as we've really worked through some deep things together as friends, Derek and I. Just that there's a calling in my life to be there and to do that with men. And I've kind of been like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, so when I'm on a job site and a guy needs a bit of an encouragement, that's kind of what I've taken it as. But I believe there's something coming out of this with a ministry for men. I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know how it is. And if you want something to pray about, please pray for me in this, because I'm curious as to what God's wanting to open here with me. But that's probably the biggest thing, the biggest change or at least the biggest thing that's come from this, month and a half off of just taking a bit of time. And so I didn't get too much into my story today. I will continue to do so in the next podcast. Going to finish talking about the cult and all the things going on there. I'm just continue to talk about the destruction that religion brings. I just want to put a reminder out. I had a conversation this past weekend. I went camping with my wife's brother from North Dakota and his family, and I was wearing a shirt that has my podcast name on it, Religion Hurts. And he just said, "Religion hurts." I was like, "Well, Dave, haven't you watched my podcast or heard about it?" "Oh, I don't have Facebook," which is probably the main way that I, put it out there for people to see. And so we just got talking about it, and he's just, kind of going, "Well, why are you saying religion is bad?" And I'm like, "Well, because religion is bad. Religion in itself, whereas just the act of doing things, I'm not a fan of. Relationship is great." But we had a great conversation about it. And here's the thing, I believe as a Christian in this world, if I'm not creating kindness to the people around me, if people come in contact with me on a daily basis, and I literally, go to work next to somebody, run into somebody at Walmart or the grocery store or wherever, and they feel less about themselves after my interaction with them, I need to be judging myself harshly, especially as a Christian. And I really believe that the impact I'm having on an everyday, that's going to be evident out of a proper relationship with God, out of a proper walk, out of understanding what the scriptures actually say. And I really, truly believe that. And so that's, again, why I do this podcast in the first place, to talk about my testimony, to have an open forum to discuss people that have been hurt in churches. And there's been a lot of people that have been hurt in churches and destroyed by church. And that's a tough thing, right? So it's just to have those conversations and that interaction between people. So anyways, love you all. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I'm back, baby. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I will talk to you next week.